We are in peak spoiler territory. And then with us this week, we have our special guest, author Mike Chen, who is the author of the recently released mystery superhero adventure, We Could Be Heroes, and contributed to, from a certain point of view, The Empire Strikes Back from the Other Star franchise, and big Star Trek fan. So thank you for being here, Mike. Happy to have you.
Thank you for having me. I am ready in my yellow engineering uniform. This is an engineering uniform. This is not tactical. I would be with Geordi in the warp core. I have a mechanical engineering degree, so we'd be fixing the warp core leak.
Perfect.
Awesome. It's good to clarify those things. That's very important.
It's important.
It is. So it's so funny because Mike and I have met on Twitter and started geeking out about various Star Trek things, and then I mentioned that we were going through Deep Space Nine and gave Mike a set of episodes, like, which ones do you want to hop on here? And you instantly chose this group, the end of season 4.
This is a great group of episodes. It's a lot of fun, a lot of big things happen, and then a lot of Ferengi hugging moments happen. So. And poor Miles O'Brien, we just lash him with more Whitmore times.
There's so
got
much.
All the tropes.
It's
all
got
the
everything.
Tropes.
It's a full peak Deep Space Nine set of episodes. So the ones that we're discussing this week, so we're finishing out season 4. We are discussing Hard Time, Shattered Mirror, The Muse, For the Cause, To the Death, The Quickening, Body Parts, and Broken Link. So normally we do 6. This time we have 8. So it's going to be a lot. But I think we'll get through it. But I think we're good to just dive in. We good?
Let's do it.
Sounds good, humans.
Awesome. All right. So the first episode we're going to discuss is Hard Time. So this is the one, this is just your peak O'Brien Must Suffer episode. This is the one where he is imprisoned and essentially over the course of hours lives out almost an entire lifetime as a prisoner, and then it kind of does these flashes back and forth from him coming out and reliving the experience that he went through. Pretty intense episode. So now, how do we feel about O'Brien Must Suffer?
I think it's... Oh, you go ahead. You start.
No, go.
I'm
Sorry.
just crashing.
No, I was just going to say, of the O'Brien Must Suffer episodes, I think this one was the most, not necessarily real, but just had, we were talking about this off air, Erin, earlier this week, like the PTSD sort of themes in this episode, I thought were quite well done. And it felt like they were doing a good service to what that can mean for people. That's what I took away from it, and it was just really intense. And I love that it was Bashir that helped him in the end. It kind of talked him out.
Our favorite bromance, yeah.
Well, not yeah.
How'd you feel about this one, Mike?
I love the fact that they don't just sci-fi their way out of it. You know, that it's like it's something that that you know, it's, they talk about how hard it is to live with one of those things, and I think, like, when you see where O'Brien is at in the final act, it's one of those things where you don't necessarily agree with him, but you I mean, you understand how he got there. You understand what he's thinking. And I think about how, you know, during the past year and a half or so, we've all probably lost our shit during COVID and being on lockdown and like living on top of someone with nowhere to go and just like uncertainty and everything. And like, I obviously don't condone where he went in the episode, but I think we all, you know, we've all gotten a little taste of like that feeling trapped and then having to deal with it afterward. And I think it's an interesting counterpoint to TNG's Chain of Command, where like Picard is so stoic, you know, to yell, "There are 4 lights," after being through something, and here you just have Miles who like loses it, and we understand and we empathize.
Yeah, that's a really good point to bring up, and a few people in the chat are talking about kind of the making of this episode, and Robert Hewitt Wolf, who wrote it, even he's referred to it as an O'Brien Must Suffer episode, but apparently his wife is a psychologist and he consulted with her a lot in this. But I think the thing that I really appreciate with this one, the way they structure it, as opposed to Chain of Command, where it's like it starts with him getting out and then we get the flashback to it. So it's like we know he's going to be okay and we understand that there's this disconnect between how much time he's experienced and how much time has passed. But what I really love is the fact that, like, he doesn't have to explain it to people in the same way Picard and, you know, not just in Chain of Command, but in Inner Light kind of is trying to convey to everyone else. Like, Bashir is there and he's just like, all right, let's take our time. Don't see Keiko just yet. Like, let me talk, you know, kind of work you through everything. And I think that that's just really sensitive and nice in a good way.
And poor Molly. I feel so bad for
no.
her.
That was particularly brutal. He has that scene where he snaps at her and she's scared. And it's kind of hard to watch.
I think,
go ahead.
Speaking as a parent in lockdown while trying to do virtual school, I think like we've all, like all my parent friends were like, yeah, I yelled at my kid today. I lost it. We're like, it's okay. My therapist says it's okay. We're all losing it.
Right, exactly.
Totally.
Yeah, I think the time aspect, and I'm glad you brought up the pandemic too, because I think a lot of us are experiencing this idea of like time has ceased to have the meaning it did before this, that weeks will, you know, I'll get an email on Monday and in my mind I'm like, all right, well, I don't have time now, I'll get to it. And then like suddenly 4 or 5 days will pass and I didn't even realize that many days have gone. And it's like, it feels this unending thing that's happening very fast, but also never seems to end. And it's very
exactly bizarre. Yeah, we don't have the same sort of like blocks in our day, you know, where you're leaving the house to go to work, then coming back and doing normal errands the same way. It's we don't have those normal beats.
Well, and it's interesting, and I'm going to bring this up too in the later episodes that we have with O'Brien, but like they've done kind of a weird thing with him in that he, you know, Keiko just came back to the station and then this happens. And then they seem to, I don't know if it's they couldn't find like a solid story to just have them without trauma, to just show them dealing with stuff, but they seem to just have all these external threats that are like constantly on their relationship that we never really get to see them together.
I think that's probably my only beef with DS9 as a series is that Keiko O'Brien is just kind of there.
Yeah.
And like she never really gets much to do other than like be Miles' support system.
Yeah. Especially when she's such a strong character in her own right. Like they could have done a lot with her, but yeah. So anyway, it's a intense episode, but I think it's a good one. I also think it's a really interesting component that they had with his sort of being haunted by his cellmate, and they introduce it in an interesting way where you're not quite sure if he was real at all until you get the whole story. And so that was because then he killed him by accident.
I will say, when I was rewatching stuff for this block over the past week, I watched all of them with my wife, but she said, I don't want to watch the O'Brien summer episode again. So
no, that's fair.
That one by myself. Yeah.
Not again.
That's fair. There are some of those episodes where you're like, look, I've lived through it.
I will say I totally guessed that was O'Brien in the beginning, like, because they start on his back and it's this person, you're just not sure who it is. And I was like, I bet that's O'Brien. And then it like comes around.
Like, so good. So
that was right.
All right, well, let's move on to the next one. So the next episode we have is Shattered Mirror, and this is another Mirror Universe episode where Jennifer from the Mirror Universe has come through and essentially takes Jake back to the Mirror Universe, and Benjamin is chasing after them, trying to bring him back. I think at least my major takeaway from this episode, because we talked about the last Mirror Universe as being like a good closure for Cisco with his relationship with Jennifer, that he then moves on to Cassidy Yates. But I feel like, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but at least I think they did a good job of giving us closure with Jake, with his mom, that he was able to have this one. So, Mike, what are your thoughts on our Mirror Universe episodes?
Mirror Nog rules. I love Mirror Nog.
Him and Jake get up to so much nonsense.
Also, when we were watching this, my wife goes, Kira in the Mirror Universe looks like Zool from Ghostbusters.
Yes.
So true.
But I agree with, like, the whole like I thought of Sliding Doors, the movie from the 90s with this, but from the Sisko family, and the way Jennifer deals with Jake, and like not, like you said, not so much our Cisco Prime, but just like you see Jake needs this. Despite all of his found family, it's like, of course he's going to gravitate to this person. And I love how like they bring something out in each other that wasn't there, like was physically impossible to be there previously. So it's a very good character episode.
Yeah. And I think it gives Jake that closure with his mom that he didn't quite have before. But what about you, Samantha? What do you think?
I agree completely. I mean, I love seeing how vulnerable Jake can be. Like he's very open and with his feelings, I think. And he's, in this episode, I think he probably logically knew that it was not his mother, but he didn't let that get in the way of him sort of succumbing to feeling so close to her, I guess. He's sort of a very interesting way of like being open to that kind of thing. So I did think it was closure for him. And I mean, as mirror universes go, I thought this was probably one of the most enjoyable that we've seen. I've not liked them as much as I expected to in in DS9 so far. So this was a pleasant sort of. At first, I was like, "Oh, great, it's a mirror episode," but then I was like, "Oh, this is actually quite enjoyable." Yeah. And I liked Sisko in this one particularly, that he sort of takes the mirror defiant, over and helps them out. And what else did I say? Oh, but. Yeah, I mean, because we talked about seeing Jennifer in the previous one as closure for Sisko, I actually was not expecting to see her again because that felt like such a button for Sisko that, but then I like that she was there for Jake this time.
Yeah, and I like the sliding doors reference, but go on.
Can I also add that I love how Garrick gets stabbed and then he's forced to walk out under his own power? It's like, well, the mirror Klingons are worse.
I know. You said that just as Laura in the chat said the Garrick Worf stuff was brilliant. And we got Mirror Worf in.
Mirror Worf was awesome. Mirror Worf was great.
Yeah, we were so my partner was him and I were trying to recall who from Deep Space Nine have we not seen in the Mirror universe. I don't think we have a Mirror Odo. Is that right?
I don't think so. I don't think we've seen Mirror Quark either. Have we?
Didn't they reference that he's dead in this?
I think so.
He was Nog says that his dad and his uncle are dead.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's true. But we did get to see Mirror Nog.
Mirror Nog.
Yeah, he's awesome. I'm terrified of him.
Seriously.
In the best way. Yep. All right. Oh, Laura said Bashir shot Mirror Odo. Yep, so Mirror Odo and Mirror Quark were killed in the first Mirror Deep Space Nine episode. Thank you, chat. Okay. Chat brain. All right. Any final thoughts on this one before we move on? Because I cannot wait to talk about the next episode.
I love how all the 24th century Terrans have mullets. It's really awesome. Like, they're stuck in the 80s.
Valid. That's amazing. All
Absolutely.
Right. So the next episode is The Muse, which I think we're all very excited to talk about. This is the episode where Jake falls under the spell of this mysterious alien woman who essentially like channels him to write furiously and cut himself off from everyone else. And then the B story, which we'll talk about, we're going to have to separate them because I'm desperate to talk about Odo and Loxana. So we'll talk about Jake and the Muse first. But so we have that. And then in the B story, we have Loxana shows up and she's pregnant because that woman's just a beautiful hot mess. And I love her so much. And she's like trying to run away from her husband because of the alien species. If they have boys, they're raised by the men, and the girls are raised by the women. And
she sure knows how to pick them.
Oh man, she's just so great. She's so great. So yeah, let's talk about the Muse and writing. And Mike, you were super excited to talk about this one, so I'll let you kick it off.
Well, I was so when it opens up and Jake is like sitting watching people do. Well, he's doing like little character sketches. Like more of us do that than you know. I think because you're trying to pick up voice and also like physical details, and just like I personally do this to like stick in a notebook to see if I can apply it somewhere. But I thought it was really funny about how what's the Muse lady's name? Onaya, is that it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, how she like Jake is writing and then she goes like, "You can edit later." I'm like, yes, that's the way to do it. Because it's like if on book Twitter we're always talking about like our craft, like what we do for craft and getting stuck and stuff, and like I'm always shouting about like put in a placeholder and then just keep going. You can edit later, because if you get stuck on this one beat, then you're going to get screwed and you're just never going to move forward. I love how Jake is like, I can finish this novel in a few days, as he's like scribbling, and then like the stack of papers like this big. I'm like, that's not accurate. Also, your tendonitis would flare up and you would not be able to move your hands. So that's the Jake part, but the Odo and Luxwana part, I loved Odo's speech.
I know.
At the end.
Oh.
And I thought it was we all have those people in our lives that like we meet, and maybe we don't know them for that long, or we only see them sporadically, but they have such an impact on us. And like Odo's speech about that is like how I feel about like persons X, Y, and Z. We're like, we're not best friends, we barely even know each other, but you had left this like footprint on my life. So
Yeah,
it was
so good.
Great performances.
Yeah, so amazing.
Yeah.
I love the write then edit. And I think everyone in the chat is agreeing with that. The terms that I've experienced in my writing life was, first of all, my partner's kid has the sloppy copy, which I love and have stolen that phrase as well, that I'm writing my sloppy copy, it's fine. And but then too, when I was writing my dissertation, my PhD supervisor was basically like, I'm not even like gonna judge, but write drunk, edit sober. It's like, have a glass of wine before you start writing. Just like you're not, off your rails, but you're just not self-editing while you're trying to get words on the paper, and then you can deal with it after the fact. And it's just great advice. It really is.
Get through the first draft and then finish it later.
Yeah, exactly. So,
I also wonder, like, when Jake was handwriting everything, I'm like, can this computer like transcribe all of that? Like, can you just put it in like the replicator and it like somehow absorbs all of that? Because someone's gonna have to type that later.
Yeah, but also his handwriting was like amazing. Like, what was that?
Who was the production assistant who did that prop?
I was like, that's a magic pen.
Right, exactly. Samantha, what do you think about this one?
Oh, there's so much packed in here about like creative process and how you can, at least as a writer, I have found that I can sometimes get hung up on the Muse aspect. Like, I can't write my best work if I'm not in the right environment, or I don't have the space to be inspired. And I've gone through different stages of that, within my writing life. And this, I thought, did a good job of how you can start to trick yourself into thinking, if I don't have the right circumstances, I'm not going to produce what I know I can. And it's like you start to doubt your talent and think you need a specific situation. And I thought that, at least to me, that seemed like a metaphorical pull away from here.
There's an interesting element too about the creative self-care, about taking a break from writing, and touched on briefly, but he definitely is at that point where he needs a break.
Yeah. Because that happens too, is you start to get in the zone, right? The zone, and you're like, I can't break now, because then I'm going to forget where I was going. But I loved that they brought up stream of consciousness writing, because that shit works. At least for me. I have to say, can confirm.
Yeah. It's interesting too. I like the theme that they put in there of Jake being not confident that he's really written it. like there's that whole sort of discussion of like this Muse sort of gave him this like weird brain thing where he vomited out this draft, and then he has this like self-doubt of like, well, did I really write it? And I think that a lot of people can relate to that if we're stealing from different stories or people or characters or things, and it's like how much of it is yours versus something else, and you have that self-doubt.
Imposter syndrome. We all have that.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things too where it's like, you know, like every writer I know, published or not, is like, oh well, my book is just a poor imitation of blank. And I think like we all like tell each other in a circle like, it is not that. It has similar themes, but it's only your book because you wrote it. But then when we look in the mirror and we're like, this is crap. I don't. So it's like it's always like external reinforcement because like our internal imposter syndrome is just like beating us over the head.
Yeah.
Can I go back to Luxwana?
Yeah. No, let's move on to Luxwana. I definitely want to talk about that.
Well, tangent to this. So like, I noticed like when they're sitting down and then like Worf has a moment to talk to Luxwana about Troy, and like I could be remembering this wrong, but they never bring up Worf and Troy again ever after season 7 of TNG, right?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so.
I googled this because I'm like, I'm pretty sure they never ever mention it, and so I'm like, this would have been a perfect moment to just have like a throwaway line to acknowledge that, but you just have Worf staring into space, which is maybe that's it right there. Is like, I don't want to deal with this. That's it.
I mean, we can probably surmise that Luxwana is the type of person that stresses Worf out. And so you could maybe not want to start a conversation with her. But
me and Worf are on the same wavelength in that regard.
Yeah, Samantha feels about Luxwana the way I feel about Q. So it's like they show up and your blood
type of chaotic
raises.
energy. Yeah, but that's actually, I was going to say, so my notes for this B plot was normally Luxwana is introduced in this like super jazzy, like lavish, overstated way. She's like bursts through the doors and she's got this outfits on and she's like, here I am. And you're like, oh, great, this is going to be a Luxwana episode or Luxwana B plot or whatever. But this time it was like, Odo just opens the door and you're not even sure who this person is yet. And it's just like Luxana sitting there, very still, crying. And I was like, that's not a normal Luxana entrance.
This is
yeah. So when I saw her, it took me a second. I was like, oh, it's this person that's normally very gregarious and energetic. And she's not that way.
She's got herself in trouble again.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so Samantha and I kind of had this conversation, and it's interesting, again, one of these things that I picked up from doing this watch, but then like hashing out the episodes, is the fact that like that first episode with Luxana and Odo where they're stuck in the turbo lift and they have that moment where he kind of is vulnerable to her and she's vulnerable to him. I gush, I'll wax poetically about that episode for hours because I love that. But I Samantha, we didn't quite see it the same way. But now watching this episode, I think it's because when now I watch that Turbo Lift episode, I know how that scene is affecting Odo in the long run. And that's what's so beautiful here. But my big takeaway from this plot is what I think they do so well is Odo has that like classic conflation of intimacy, like platonic intimacy with being in love. And so he kind of confuses them. And he's like, he knows Luxana annoys the crap out of him. But at the same time, she sees him. He feels validated by her. But she's conscious of that enough to kind of put the brakes on and to just give him that dose of reality, which I think is so powerful.
Yeah, I loved that last scene. Her little speech to him was just magnificent because it seemed almost to me like growth for her as well, like recognizing that and not jumping into something that could be, nice at first. But I loved how she said, like, what you really want and enjoy here is friendship. And I would end up wanting more that you can't give me. Like she kind of has that foresight, and the just like, you know, the way she delivered those lines was very gentle yet like just perfect. I don't know. I really, really liked that last bit with them together.
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts on this one?
Back to Jake really quick. So I love the very end when Benjamin is reading it and he's so encouraging, but also like needles him about his spelling, and like it's just as someone with a lot of author friends, like our families are not always the most supportive. And I love Sisko family affection, and I love it here in terms of how he's encouraging Jake, and he's always been encouraging of Jake to like explore his passion and to do right by it. And I think that's just, it's such a nice example on, I mean, considering this was aired in the 90s, you know, that's still kind of amazing that it's there.
Yeah. I had one other thought actually about the Muse characters. I thought the assumption that she capitalizes on, it was so interesting. The assumption that all artists want to be remembered and have this sort of thing in them that they want to put something in the world that's going to outlast them. And she sort of needles that personality trait almost in people. But it also, you know, to me, I was like, well, it's such an interesting discussion of like, if you feel like an artist, do you know, what's the gradation there? Like, can you just write for yourself, or is there a thing where you need to or should want to put something out, you know, in public and that kind of thing? So I thought that was an interesting, her you know, the weaknesses that she exploits in that.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Yeah, that definitely is her justification for her actions, is like, but I'm making you immortal, and if that's enough or not. Okay, so the next episode is For the Cause. So this is the one where Cassidy Yates is under suspicion for smuggling stuff to the Maquis, and Eddington is now revealed to be a member of the Maquis. So this is just a great double bluffs galore, who to trust where, like who's being drawn where, who's doing what. And my big question was because you did not like Eddington from the beginning, and we all kept our mouths shut pretty well. But how was this reveal for you?
This was not spoiled for me. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. But I was not expecting it either, at all. When he shot Kira, I was like, changeling. So, that's where I am. Like, that's where my brain is. Everyone who does something out of character is a changeling. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting to have the Maquis kind of bubble up again. Like we hadn't mentioned them maybe once or twice in passing in the past, like season and a half, 2 seasons. So now that they're kind of being more a part of the conversation is interesting. I just like DS9, it's like Maquis, changelings, founders, Dominion, observations, like I don't know, there's like a million different Jem'Hadar, like I'm having a hard time keeping that straight, so I'm glad I knew what the Maquis was.
Fair enough. I don't know, Mike, how do you feel about these the Maquis and the just general reveal of a agent?
So the way that I'm watching this, like I've seen the series before, but I'm rewatching it with my wife, this was the only Trek series that she had not seen. Awesome. And so when she first saw Eddington, she was like, I don't like him. There's something off about him. And so when he was revealed here, she's like, I knew it. Screw that guy. I love moral gray area episodes like this. I love the position that it puts Sisko in, because every time there's one of these, like, you know, how do you handle this episode? Like, I run through my head. It's like, how would Picard do this? How would Janeway do this? So it's interesting, like having Sisko have these different pressures on there, and it's like you can see he's really bad at being sneaky when he's talking to like, so where are you taking your ship, huh? Like,
He's really
come on,
bad.
Benjamin. Like,
True.
You're terrible at this.
Be cool, man.
It's like, you should really have Kara talk to her. She's way better. But I just, the line from Eddington that sticks with me is, you assimilate people when he's talking about Starfleet. You assimilate people and they don't even know it. And that's the kind of boldness in DS9 that I feel like you would not get in other Star Trek series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's completely valid. And like you said, the morally gray area that I think they do such a good job, because it is revealed that Cassidy Yates is supplying to the Maquis, and she did know this and she was doing it, but the motivations and why she was doing it is not what we expect. So she's not just this like, you know, hardcore villain like Eddington is. It's still, there's that nuance where, was she like, how much is she against the Federation, or is she just trying to help out? And it's really interesting.
Also, her ship looks very Star Warsy.
Yeah, it's super nice. Cargo freighters for the win.
Right.
It's like they took
That's
a
funny.
they took a blockade runner toy from Target and he just stuck it in there. Like chopped off one side of it.
That's awesome. It's so good. All right. We can keep moving because I know there's still a few that we want to discuss in great detail, but were there any things about this one that we wanted to hit that we haven't mentioned yet?
I love
really.
Cisco saying to Jake, "You're the writer. Make something up."
Right.
Yeah, for sure. I think probably the last thing too is when we were talking about like how I felt very awkward for Cisco when they're doing those inspections and then Cassidy calls him to get it expedited. Like that is one of those very clear things of, it's like, this is why you don't get involved in that sort of nonsense, is because now she's making that call to try to get around it, and it's just awkward all up and down.
I have something for the chat to consider, because my wife and I talk about this because you always see Cisco cooking, and this is like one of those episodes where they have that, and I'm like, I could live off replicator food. I don't care. You know, it's like, give me a replicator carne asada burrito. It's close enough. I'm enjoying it. So if for the chat, if you're living in, you know, Star Trek time, would you still cook? Or would you just take on the replicator food? I would be fine with replicator food. I'd rather have time to do stuff.
Interesting. I find baking fun. It's like a challenge. I think that's a scientist in me that I'm like, try to make this like, it's the closest to witchcraft I can get. It's like, make this magic happen with like bread, water, and sugar. It's like, but yeah, it's I think most people agree with you. It looks like people are like, I'm not a good cook. Nope, don't cook.
I'm super sciencey, and I never enjoyed the science of cooking. Like, I can appreciate it, and my wife is a total foodie, and I'm like, I don't have the patience for this.
Fair enough. I like that. It's a good question. And yeah, I mean, Cairo brought up the point, depends on what the taste difference is that if you can tell the difference.
We don't know that, huh? Like, with what they've established.
Yeah. So if it's like, I mean, it's one of those that if it meets it 90% of the way, then I'd probably be good with it most of the time, but then for a treat. But I think, like, because my quarantine hobby has been smoking meats, and so, like, I feel like that's probably frowned upon on a space station. So.
That might not go down so well.
Odo would not be happy with you.
Yeah, exactly.
What does this smell?
I don't know how you can safely smoke meat on a space station. Awesome. Good question. I love that. Okay, so the next episode we have is To the Death. So this is where the Deep Space Nine crew join a Jem'Hadar team to prevent renegade Jem'Hadar from using a gateway that can transport them anywhere in the galaxy. Love that. We'll talk about that shortly. And then they basically have like this culture clash where one of the Jem'Hadar picks a fight with Worf, and then they break up the fight, and Cisco's like, Worf, man, be cool, like, take a breather, and then the Jem'Hadar like snaps his neck. So we have a little bit of a culture clash here, and we get Weyoun for the first time. And Samantha doesn't know why Mike and I are so excited about this, but Weyoun is like one of my favorite characters. So, Jem'Hadar, thoughts?
They're here again.
I'll let Samantha go first because I want to hear her thoughts on this.
Yeah.
Well, we've started to see a lot more about them and more like factioning in their ranks, and I think this was an interesting look at because they're controlled soldiers basically, and they're lab created type beings, so you don't necessarily expect them to have a sense of self and a sense of any moral sense really, because they're basically just bred to be a certain way and they're controlled. But we saw in the previous episode with Bashir and O'Brien that there is a capability. They can grow away from that control and develop more sense of self. And this one, what I'm getting at is I think that even in that controlled sort of soldier atmosphere, I saw more individuality in them than I expected. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know what else. They're cool though. I like how they look. I like the whole thing. Like I'm curious to see what if they break fully away and develop into something else. And yeah, anyway, they're cool.
I have so much I want to say about Wei Yun, but I can't.
Oh, we'll bring you back.
He did not like. He was the guy that looked like a vampire, right?
Yeah, the Vorta. Yeah. So
I did not like him.
So he is so he's played by Jeffrey Combs, who you've now seen as Brunt as well.
No, you have to say it Brunt, FCA.
Sorry, yeah, Brunt, FCA.
I love Brunt.
FCA. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what can you say, I guess, at this point about the Vorta and the Jem'Hadar? Because yeah.
So I think what's really interesting, again, so this is the second time that I've watched the series, but it's been like about 15 years or so since I've seen it. And in between, I've watched a lot of Clone Wars. And Clone Wars does a really good job humanizing the clones and how the different factions in there, part of them treat them just like weapons and part of them treat them like people. Where I feel like here, like they are, I love how they're going, like, we're just leaning into the, like, we're just using them. They live for 3 years. We give them drugs, and that's that. And it's, again, moral complexity in DS9. Just the way that it's a very good analog for the whole, like, war is hell type of thing. You have to make, strange bedfellows and all that stuff. The beat that actually sticks with me the most from this episode is when O'Brien and Dax are talking about recording messages for their families. And then O'Brien says this is like the 11th time that he's done it, I think. And I think we don't really see a lot of that aspect of Starfleet a lot. Because O'Brien talks about, like, what he's done for Starfleet, but then what we see him previous to DS9 is he's just hanging out in the transporter room on the Enterprise D. So I love how DS9 is really just coloring in so many elements of what you expect out of Star Trek.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And also, I love the opening bit with Worf in the chair and in the mess hall, because it's just like, they're just high schoolers. This is awesome.
It's so good. They're like, that's where he sits. It's like, it's not a sense of, like, it's where he sits.
It's where he sits.
Yeah.
But with Wei Yun, I will say, I think, like, this is not spoilery, but I think his character as a blueprint for what you see in a lot of modern TV now. I think, like, he you can pinpoint in various popular series, like, oh, that's like Wei Yun.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
I would agree with that. But Cairo made the very good point that why are we talking so much about Wei Yun if he dies in this episode? And I suppose that's probably the most spoilery that we'll get. We won't explain any further than that. But
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's fine.
Oh.
That's fine. I can't contain my excitement about Wei Yun showing up on the screen. So.
We were just excited about this single episode. That's it. Nothing else happened.
But I love...
We just love Jeffrey Combs. I met him at a con. He's really nice.
Really is. I love him so much. I can't... I do fangirl over Jeffrey Combs, and it's... Yeah, I just love him. But yeah, I love your comparison to the Clone Wars, because I think that it is... And that is something that Deep Space Nine set itself apart. And then I think Voyager picked up a little bit from that too. But in TNG, you had these things where it was like, Borg are bad and Cardassians are bad. And then like...
Cardassians are bad.
For Garrick, we love Garrick. But
no, he's still kind of a bad dude, though.
I suppose. I just let a lot of things slide with him because I love him so much. But I think like the fact that they even took the Jem'Hadar, which are just this like literally bred to be warriors, and still created a complexity in a gray area with them, I think is just really impressive and speaks to why DS9 is so good.
The little conversation that Dax has with the one who's supposed to be on her team, who's just like standing there looking at her, and she's like, please stop. But then she tries to have a conversation, and he doesn't get that. And I thought that was just an interesting little glimpse into, you know, who they are as beings, and her trying to find some kind of common ground or just have a conversation, and he wasn't getting it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, we should keep going. Any last ones on this one?
No.
I could talk about Weyoun all day.
Can't say anything else.
I know.
Weyoun only exists here, this one episode.
Exactly. All right, so the next episode is The Quickening. This is sort of a classic Star Trek episode. You know, we have the episodes like this in all the series where Dax, Kira, and Bashir are on an away mission where there's a plague-afflicted planet in the Gamma Quadrant, and Bashir is trying to find a cure to this like lethal disease that this whole society is just accepts will kill him. This is the one that kind of looks like the Borg are taking over them. If that reminds anyone of this one. And sort of the big kind of takeaways from this is just this idea, this nuanced take on how societies deal with science and deal with like accepted death and, assisted suicide and all of this. So it's a pretty deep episode, but I think DS9 handles it in a way that's kind of darker than the way the other ones do. But Mike, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one.
So the opening bit with Quarks is
come to Quarks. Quarks is fun. Come right now. Don't walk. Run.
It is like one of the highlights of the series, and it feels like completely out of place in such a heavy episode. Like my wife, when we finished it, she's like, why did they make me laugh so hard at the beginning, and then it's never brought up again, and now I'm just like destroyed. But then
good point.
There's great remixes of the Quarks jingle on YouTube, so everyone look that up.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
This, like you said, this feels like the classic Trek moral dilemma, and I feel like if this was TNG, like they would have found a way to like extract something from the baby that like heals everyone, but because it's not here, like they talk about it, it's not a task, it's a privilege, and like building better for the next generation. Sorry about that.
Well done. That was you caught it as you were saying it. Well done.
I mean, God, like the whole idea of like, how do we treat science and death and medicine right now? I think like we all know way too much about this now than we really want to. So like it's one of those, like, I remember watching it with my wife, and she's like, I feel kind of uncomfortable watching these discussions. And also it's another planet that looks like Southern California. So yeah. The rocks in Southern California. It's a great episode. It's a great character episode. I love how Bashir is not just the savior, and like how it goes wrong in ways that would not happen to like if Crusher was doing it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because I think the episode I'm reminded of the most was that TNG, like the one in TNG, is the one where they all have that like radiation poisoning, that Data's there and like trying to figure that out. And again, it's it's just very clear arc, and that just doesn't really happen here. But so Samantha loved Bashir from day one, which I was like surprised by. If I'm perfectly honest. But what do you think of this one and Bashir?
Well, yes, I love me a Bashir episode. So it was this was like you say, a much darker type of storyline, and in particular the fact that he makes a pretty big mistake, like accelerates the issue. Of course he didn't know that the instruments were causing it, but there was that moment when everyone is basically begging the other doctor for his death cure, and Bashir's just standing there, like, and they're all, you can just hear it, and he feels so helpless, and feels so bad in that moment, and then decides to go back and sort of face that mistake. That to me was really a great moment. And I think that this was a good Bashir episode to me.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
It's just, I think it's really good. Let me see if there are any notes, because we've got two more deep ones to talk about.
One thing I wonder is, like, what was Kira doing, like, when she says, like, I'm gonna go fly by like this nebula and wait for you for like a week? And I'm like, what is she just like, playing on her phone? She's like, I downloaded this new app and I'm just gonna mess around with it. It's not like you have a holosuite there.
I'm just gonna nope out of this for a little while.
No thanks.
This is too uncomfortable for me, which I get. I've done that in social situations. So, Astro said catching up on her sleep. So let's do it.
I could use that.
Yeah, I like that. Kira private time. That's what she's got the confidence to assert that she needs her alone time.
Yeah. She's probably like, I just wanted to read for so long. My stack is so big. This is going to be fantastic.
I was like, I shared that picture from the last set that we watched where O'Brien and Kira are on the craft together, and Kira's like got her legs up and her arms like this, and I was like, I feel Kira so hard in that moment. It's really good.
100%.
Okay, so the last two, the first one is body parts. God, I love this episode. This might be my top 10 Deep Space Nine episodes.
It's up there.
It's
really
so good. So this is where Quark basically learns that he has, from his Ferengi doctor, that he has a rare disease called Dorek syndrome that basically means he's going to die within a week. And then per Ferengi tradition, he starts raising money to pay off all his debts, auctioning off his remains. Then, in only a few hours, he finds out that his exam was a mistake and that he's not gonna die. And Brunt, FCA, shows up and chases him down on that. And then we have another plot here that I definitely want to talk about, because I have my visceral reaction to this storyline. And then, again, thanks to doing these conversations, I actually think deeper about why I don't like these storylines. And but this is essentially where there's an accident with Kira and Keiko, and to account for Nana Visitor's pregnancy at the time, they wrote in the storyline that Keiko transfers the baby to Kira, and I have thoughts, but let's talk about the Ferengi. So Samantha has gone on a journey with the Ferengi, but I would love to hear, Mike, what you think of the Ferengi and Quark, and it's just a peak Ferengi episode.
So I think the best way to convey this is, so my wife, when I said like she's watching DS9 for the first time, and we're using a binge guide because we're parents in a pandemic and we don't have a lot of time right now. But when we go back to find episodes to we just want to watch DS9 tonight and not move the story forward, we always find a Ferengi episode. And it was not like that, because, based on her experience in TNG, she's like, oh God, they're so annoying. And now she's like, I love Quark. He's the best. Let's give me more of the Quark's family episodes. Give me more Moogie.
Like exactly what happened to me.
Yeah. So, and I think this episode is, I mean, everyone deals with family pressures in different ways. Like if you don't, then bless you, you have a better existence than me. But I think like we all have that feeling of like displacement and external pressure from families, and like whether you just move to a different city, or you're a child of an immigrant, or you just have a really weird family culture, and to be kind of swimming upstream against that. And even when you tell yourself you're not, I mean, that really is like the big takeaway to me here. And the fact that in the end, all of us get the opportunity to choose our family, and you don't have to succumb to those pressures. And then also we have to talk about Garrick and Quark.
Yes. Oh my God.
That's too loud. Their gas smells bad.
My favorite
Brilliant
scene. I was literally in tears. I was laughing so hard so this is where Quark asks Garrick to kill him so he can fulfill his arrangement. And then you essentially see Quark eating, and then Garrick comes up and snaps his neck and he falls into the food. And then it turns out that this was like a simulation, and Quark's response is like, no, that was too upsetting. That's too loud. I don't want bones cracking to be the last thing I hear. And he's like,
painting takes too long.
Poison? I'm not going to eat
So
food
funny.
if I know it has poison in it.
And he's like, and then he just sort of he keeps going. He makes the mistake of saying, "I just want to be surprised." And Garrick's like, "We can work with that."
I love Garrick.
And then it's
He's
just
the
like,
best. He's an assassin, but he's the best.
Oh, it's amazing.
Love it. So Samantha, what do you think of this one?
This was such a great Quark episode. I mean, the fact that he gets all the way, like all the beats in the episode lead up to him doing something that's very un-Quark-like. But he was, I guess, faced with his own mortality, because the only other way out of it was his own death. And he has enough self-preservation instincts to not want to do that. But the alternative was, kind of breaking the contract. And he sees all of his worldly possessions taken away. And but the ending was so great. It was like full on It's a Wonderful Life moment. Like everyone's walking through the door with the, to help him out. And like when he realizes what's happening, it's just you can see he's trying to process people actually caring.
Yeah.
And that was such a great moment. Yeah. And
So
I think,
good.
yeah.
I love, just some of the lines are just brilliant. I mean, we talked about the Garrick scene where, again, tears of laughter. It's like, it wasn't that loud. And then too, and Mike, as you were talking about this idea we're struggling against like the culture thing, and I love the scene when he's going to Garrick to ask him to kill him, and Rom is like tagging along with him. He's like, look, you can break it. Like, I formed a union. Like, if I can do that, you can push against that. And I just thought that was great. Yeah. And then also when they and hi Juja, thank you for the follow. When they're trying to figure out who bought Quark, and then they were like, do you think it's Moogie? No, she doesn't like me that much. Oh, great.
From an Asian family, I totally understand.
So good. But yeah, I think the theme of found family is so awesome in this, and it's just so touching and so wonderful, and I think threads through into the next episode as well. But before we move on to that, we got to talk about the Keiko Kira storyline, because I hate it. And as soon as this comes up, I'm just like, oh my God, I literally despise this. But because this is an exercise in reflection and having these discussions, I think what makes me so uncomfortable with this episode and with this whole storyline is the fact that, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, like, we haven't had a chance to explore just Miles and Keiko. And I think it's like Kira feels like this third party intrusion where it's almost, I mean, this is a little glib to say, it's not quite fair, but the analogy I can think of is like when when you have like friends or couples who are not doing so well, and then they decide that everything will be better when they get a puppy, or like everything will be better when they get a kid. I feel like this is very similar, that it's just like, okay, well, let's not work on our own problems. Let's just like, now we have Kira to focus on. And I think that's what annoys me so much with it. I think it's a smart way to handle the Na visitor being pregnant and from a sci-fi story standpoint. But anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
I don't know what to think. That's my contribution to the conversation.
You'll have opinions later, I'm sure.
Sure I will. Right now I'm just like, well, that was weird.
There is one particular episode in this storyline where I'm like, that didn't need to happen. Erin probably knows what I'm talking about.
I know exactly which one you're talking about. I skip it every time, and now I'm going to be forced to watch it, and it'll be okay.
Yeah,
but...
and it's like, this doesn't even make sense, like in terms of the characters. But I think they try to do something clever to help with the real world situation, and like you said, like Keiko just doesn't get a lot to do in this series, and that really is the problem. So it's like it's just kind of being backed into a corner with it, and I know, you know, they said like, well, we wanted to do something where we didn't just have to shoot Kira from like the head up like we did with, you know, other shows. I get that, but I think like this could not exist and like it would be fine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. That's kind of how I feel at this point.
Although I should probably point out that if this means that we didn't have to deal with a Shakar Kira storyline, then I'm probably more okay with it.
Yeah. Fair.
Fair. But yeah, it's a little bit rough.
And also Molly just like disappears for episodes, and like I feel like that doesn't get addressed. I'm sure it's all practical with like getting the child actress and, you know, scheduling and stuff like that, and there's not much you can write about that. Yeah. But it feels like this kind of stuff just kind of gets tagged on as like, oh yeah, we have to check this box.
Right.
Yeah.
When's the last time we saw Molly? Oh shoot, we better write her in.
Exactly. Give her 2 lines and then.
Yeah. For sure. Okay, so great episode. Love this episode. Could talk about Quark and Garrick till forever. So the last episode of the season, and we're going to go over by a few minutes so we can talk about this one. But this one is Broken Link. This is the season finale of season 4. This is where Odo becomes ill and basically can't hold a solid form. And so the Defiant takes him basically to the Founder's homeworld to try to find a cure. And then he gets turned into a human as punishment. They're essentially holding him on trial for how he's been involved with the Federation and has chosen the humans over his own people. So in my opinion, I feel like they are taking that found family theme that we have now in Deep Space Nine. The last episode, it was really Quark and looking at their relationship and how Deep Space Nine functions as a station. This is taking it a little bit broader. Now we look at how Deep Space Nine sees Odo as his, and Odo is actively choosing his found family. And the big reveal is that Gowron has been replaced as a changeling. Gowron.
Yes.
So Samantha, let's start with you on how you felt about the season finale.
Yeah, lots here. I have to say the Odo storyline, I was not expecting that in the slightest, for him to become human. That was a big surprise. And I'm very curious now to see how that informs his character, informs what he goes through next. So I thought that was super interesting, a super interesting way to go with him. And yeah, we've got Gowron is the first major changeling that I know of who has been revealed. Actually, I think the only one at this point. And my biggest question is like, but how long has he been? Like, has he been one since TNG? Like, when was he replaced? Is the real Gowron dead? Is like that? I have questions.
Tune in next time.
Yeah.
Yeah, such a good cliffhanger.
Yes. And Garrick. So I thought Garrick's his instincts are really interesting. In that he's both survival instinct based and yet like not necessarily selfless, but like we are going to blow ourselves up to save the entire galaxy. And it's not like that was necessarily from the goodness of his heart. It was just what he was feeling in that moment. He's reactionary in certain ways. And so I thought his parts in this episode were also very continuing to be revealing about Garrick's character.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. How'd you like this one, Mike?
This is one of my favorite episodes of the series. And I think we were talking about it offline before we started here about how it's such a big pivot point for the series. Like things just get really intense here. And I love how it's all done through Odo. Like Odo is the catalyst for this massive upping the stakes of everything. And I think about like, you know, the cliffhanger at the end of Best of Both Worlds, you know, where it's like, oh, what's going to happen? And that one had, you know, Borg and explosions and all this other stuff. And then here it's like, it takes Odo's character and his people, and I feel like the cliffhanger is just as big, but it does it in a completely character-driven way, and that's really, really unique for a genre series. So, like, I love everything about this. Well, actually, no. The only thing I don't love about it is like the very beginning when it's like, is Odo into babes? I don't know. You know, and Garrick is like, check her out. Feels like a Rick Berman idea. But other than that, I love everything. Garrick, I love how he's pivoting and adapting to everything that happens, like moment by moment. Mm-hmm. And so, Samantha, I think as you see more of Garrick develop in the coming seasons, like you're going to see what this feels very authentic to him. That's all I can say. Mm-hmm. And his argument with Worf about like, do we destroy them all, comes to me from like it reminds me of the Tom Baker Doctor Who in Genesis of the Daleks, when he's got the two wires and like he can commit genocide and good things will happen for the galaxy, but then the idea is like, well, does he have the right to do that? And I know like Garrick and Worf like frame it a little bit differently, but that's kind of how I thought about, like, you know, Garrick sees an opportunity here, and then like, you know, Worf is representing Starfleet of like, we can't do that. I'm going to throw you over here. So again, moral complexity, DS9. DS9 is really, really good at that. So yeah, I loved everything about this episode. And also Odo's makeup is so creepy in this episode. It's like, I wonder, like, did they like do his normal makeup and then dump mud on him, you know, to make it like
so
glisten
bad.
and stuff?
It's so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's like changeling leprosy. It's like
pretty intense. Good. Yeah. I love too with Garrick how when they're trying to like distract Odo and like take care of him, Garrick is like, I'll volunteer and I'm just gonna bring my chaos to Odo and be like, well, am I a gardener? Was I a gardener? Like, what did I do on Cardassia? Do you know? Here's some hints.
It's so true. And I love how Cisco picks up on, oh, that will work. Yeah. That's like, Cisco's like, you're making sense right now. You're hired. Like, I like that he gets that. It's cool.
That's so funny. One of my other favorite moments is when they are flying in the Defiant without a cloak, and all of them are like, this feels wrong. Worf and Cisco and O'Brien are like, nope, don't like this. Don't like this. I feel naked. I feel exposed. And Jadzia just pokes constantly. She's like, it's just interesting being in a room with so many naked men. Such a great line. Yeah, they move another great line. I just write down my favorite lines from this, but where Keiko and O'Brien have Kira move in with them. Again, feelings on the storyline, but then O'Brien's just really funny when he's like, I think I'm going to ask Julian to come live with us.
I need help.
It's really good. But yeah, I mean, Mike, I think you make the excellent point of it's just, this is like, it's a great way where it's still very high stakes, and yet we're not dealing with massive ship destruction, explosions, and all of that, but it still feels very tense. And I just think it's so touching when DS9, the crew, drop everything to take care of Odo. You know, that you know, he's like, it could be hours, it could be days, and they're like, okay, we're here for you.
We're good.
Yeah.
His exchange with Quark is so good. Like, you know, it's the things that are not said, and the way that they play it. They're the best.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Any final thoughts on this round of episodes?
No, can't wait to start season 5.
You're in for some stuff, Samantha.
Yeah. It's a whole thing coming up. And like I mentioned at the top of this discussion, Samantha has executively decided to stop watching the chat at this point.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
There's a whole lot coming.
It's not going to happen.
So thank you so much, Mike, for joining us. This was
Thank you for having me. Bring me back, please, so we can talk about Star Trek again.
Deal. Sounds good.
Happily.
Okay. Is there anything you'd like to kind of plug? I put some stuff in the chat for people to check out, but...
So I contribute to StarTrek.com. There was the article that stands with the Asian American Pacific Islander community that came out last week, and they have quotes from George Takei and Garrett Wayne and other cast and crew. And I was very fortunate to write the essay that introduces that, and I get to talk about systemic racism and generational trauma and the myth of the model minority that really affects Asian Americans from generation to generation, and why it's time to break that. So please check that out. I also write science fiction books, which are not as important as Star Trek, but my latest came out in January. It's called We Could Be Heroes. It's about a superhero and a supervillain who become friends, kind of like Garrick and Bashir. So yeah, that's me. I'm on Twitter a lot at Mike Chen Writer, and I talk about Star Trek and Star Wars and other stuff a lot.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Awesome.
It's really been a pleasure. And I put all the links to those things in the chat so people can check those out. And next week, we're starting season 5. And so we're going to be talking about Apocalypse Rising, the ship, looking for Parmok in all the wrong places.
Oh, that's a good one.
I know. Nor the Battle to the Strong, the Assignment, and Trials and Tribulations. And we may do some watch parties on my channel, so keep an eye on my Twitter feed for those to be happening.
You're going to have fun, Samantha.
I've heard of tribbles. I don't know what they are, but I've heard of them.
You're about to learn. All right, well, thanks again, Mike. Thanks to everyone for hanging out in the chat. And until next time, live long and prosper. All right, bye, everyone.